Welcome to NCCX Gibsonville. This is the regional championships of the North Carolina Cyclocross Series. Starting off with pretty good course, very power based. We start off on this pavement, slight uphill into a left-hander, and we've got the usual suspects from the NCCX series. We've also got a lot of guys from the Brevard College in, so about 16 to 20 guys in the group, and we're going to start off pretty hard here. I didn't quite get the pedal, and then Nate moved over into my line just a little bit there, but was able to get back on the pedals and then actually get around Owen here for the whole shot, which wasn't that consequential, being a pretty wide open course with lots of passing, but allowed me to get into this part, which was a little less confident for me, especially the first few laps. I would just, there you go, lose speed into it, wheelied into it that time, and then coming out of it, actually had a little bit of gap. Nate informed me that there was some carnage behind, so we're coming into this little fast grass section, which kind of was a off-camber slippery grass part. I clip pedals all the time on that coming out of it. And then you got a nice 180 into a steep section I'm going to call the Switchblade. And I actually lost it first lap. Was able to stay clipped in, but just slowed up a lot and slowed the guys up behind me.
That was pretty bad.
So kept going through this spot. Got chirped by Robert Marion there saying worst line ever. But was still in front. Hit that little bumpy section into another fast section, but you come up to this turn, which the theme of the course is pretty much just bumps in corners, fast grass corners, and there was one in that. Come to another 180 leading into the barriers, and I was just running the barriers. I wasn't able to get it consistent through the warm-up, but I actually jammed my toe into the front of my shoe on the barriers first lap and realized I had to come into a little less speed to preserve my my feet a little later in the lap here, and Nate's taken over the pacing into the woods section here. We call this the log hop, and he was actually able to ride it up to that hill and then over the route, which I was obviously not able to ride it, so he got a little bit of a gap while I was remounting my bike, and then I was able to get back on his wheel, but pushing the pace pretty good, and definitely made me burn a little bit of a match early into the race here, still with 56 minutes to go. You come down into another little off-camber section that is pretty dusty, and a lot of people lost traction on that. Definitely had to take it slower. Nate coming into the finish straight here on that same lap, clipped a pedal and lost the rear wheel just a little bit, but not too big of a deal. That last corner was pretty tricky. Definitely wanted to be first into that on the last lap. I decided to take pacing up again, and was on the front for a while, coming back into that fast grass section, and then clipped my pedal, so John Paul came around me, and then into that 180 again, and into the Switchblade. You get to see a little bit different lines. So John Paul went wide and then came up a little too early, ended up having to unclip, and I could get around even going as slow as I was every lap. A little bit later, we're coming back through the start finish, and the group is still together. I think we have 5 guys: me, Gabe, Nate, Owen, and John Paul. I decided to start pedaling a little harder once Gabe came up, just to stay on his wheel. He was going to push the pace into these up and downs over here, and I was still not confident with them yet, so wanted to be pretty close on his wheel for those. I did figure this section out a little bit more as we came through the rest of the race, but this first one, definitely couldn't completely get it figured out, although Gabe had, a little bit of a gap out of it. Coming into the fast grass section, he was keeping the pace pretty high. We're doing like 17 miles an hour there, which is pretty fast. 19 out of that slow little part. And he exited a little wider, which I started doing towards the end of the race, coming into into that next switchback here. Kept a pretty good pace, and then actually got a little bit of a gap on me into the switchblade, and he did another exit high and then had to put a foot out, which made me not have to do too much there. A little later in that same lap, and John Paul and Owen are going to come past Gabe into this next corner. He was kind of trying to defend that line and ended up bumping elbows onto Owen's hip there. This next part, he looked back at me and there was just a little tiny gap into what is kind of a blind left-hander on the course here. It decreases the radius really quickly. I finally started figuring that one out, but it's pretty dirty exit, and then you have some pretty fast single track right after that. But that was a very fun section of the course. Coming up to this part, call it the slalom. There's a nice uphill, very draggy uphill. I like to attack on that into this slalom section, and then get a little gap into the log hop, coming back through the start finish here. Nate, the whole group's still together. Nate's taking up pacing a little bit with Owen and John Paul, who we're all looking at pretty intensely because we know they're fast. And Owen and John Paul here are going to go around Nate. I didn't quite make it before that turn, thinking Nate would grab that wheel, but it was halfway through the race now. We've been going pretty full gas the whole time. So once we get through this up and down section, there's going to be a little bit of a gap for me, and Gabe's going to yell at me to get onto that wheel. Starting to get a little nervous as they lift the pace up front, and it looks like Nate is running out of matches a little bit there. So coming into the fast grass section, there's a gap to Owen and John Paul, which I'm going to have to try and close through the 180 and then into this switchblade here. I've got the line a little bit more figured out, but it's still slow. Doesn't seem like matters how you take it. Nate had a good line there, a little bit faster. So now there's a gap. So this lap I'm going to have to bridge back up, burn a match to get up to John Paul and Owen, which I'm just going to have to use the long straights to do. The way I was racing this was just banking on road fitness, and luckily there wasn't too much technicality in it to make that weakness shine through that much. Old Nate was jumping the barriers, which was pretty quick. Especially on the exit here, where he was able to get back onto the pedals a lot faster because he was on his bike. This is where he kind of hit a wall, and then I had to come by and try and bridge up to that as fast as I possibly could. It's a pretty fast section of the course, going nearly 22 miles an hour into another 180. Lots of 180s here, but this next left turn here, very fast sweeper on some dirt, and then a nice kicker up to the top. Which was really helpful in hitting it. You could attack into that and put some pain on. I knew when I was in the wheels and Owen or John Paul were hitting it up that it was pretty hard. So coming into another 180 right next to the pits, and then back into the woods. This next lap, same corner. I've already caught on. It took me about a lap to catch on comfortably with those guys, and we're all just gonna kind of roll together for a good lap, just kind of watching each other, seeing what the other people are doing. And I'm feeling pretty good at this point because I've caught up, and I think they're feeling the efforts of the race. So once we get out of this single track section, I'm gonna go ahead and put a little dig in, see if I can put some hurt on those guys. I really was expecting them to break sooner in this, but they had plenty of matches today. So came around right here with a good bit of speed. Thought this was a pretty effective attack, seeing as they were sitting up, so hopefully that put a little bit of hurt on them. Ended up hitting 22 miles an hour on this grassy uphill into the slalom. And then by the time we got to like the second slalom, they were already back on me. But I would keep the front for the next lap or two. Just keep the pace nice and high, surging out of corners to try and gap them, so that they wouldn't get back on the wheel. And then eventually I decided to slow down a good bit, take a little rest, make them take a little rest too. And at that point of the slalom, John Paul decided to attack, which was a good time. I was able to hop back on to Owen's wheel. We were all able to respond pretty well, but at this point it is just the three of us, with Gabe trailing closely behind and Nate as well. So we can't sit up too much, got to keep that gap. I'm watching Gabe for the overall series points, sitting in second now behind him, so want to get some more points on him, and then also thinking about the race win and North Carolina state champs or what have you. But the main part is learning a lot of these corners and getting a good workout in. So we're going pretty hard now. John Paul's keeping on the pace. We're getting close to the end, so it's pretty important for us to keep this pace high, keep everybody fatigued, and hoping everybody fatigues more than I do. But a lot of these corners are really zapping energy. I tend to leave a little bit of a gap. Been trying that a little bit this year, of just leaving a little more of a gap. So when stuff like that happens, where Owen just hits a little rock, I don't lose any momentum from being right on his wheel, sliding into that one too. So we come back into this log hop, and we're all, just kind of staying together, seeing how it's going to pan out in the next 2 laps, and trying to keep the pace on. Once we get around this corner, we did all kind of sit up pretty good, looking at each other a little bit, and got a little comment there: stop looking back and race your bikes. But I think at this point we know Gabe's probably not going to catch us in the next 2 laps, so we're looking at each other and trying to see who's going to do what next. I really like going on this little downhill into the uphill. Helped keep the pace a little lower on the steep uphill there, but decided not to this lap. Seemed like those guys were pretty composed. John Paul came around and stopped me from taking that corner, or that line rather, and then we'd hit this uphill with a little less pace. So this one was pretty hard at this point. We all needed to recover, but we'd come around and enter pretty close to the last lap. So I'm thinking I'm gonna need to attack here pretty soon. Gonna have to elevate the pace and see what we can do from there. But mainly just stay on the wheels and don't make any mistakes. The past few races I've just been banking on other people making mistakes, which is usually how I handle races, is I make the mistake. So really banking on others making mistakes and staying within myself. But on this one it's really important, just because it's such a power course, to keep the pace high. So once we have a little lull like this, I know I'm going to have to start getting the pace up a little bit. Another guy asked if we're racing. I just give him the, I don't know, look. But it's going to start getting heated here. So we're coming into 2 laps to go around this corner. John Paul's putting the pace on a little bit, and then Owen actually swings wide into the tape there. But I took it at like a standard speed for what we had been doing, and then get onto the pavement. We come a little later into that lap into the barriers, and just about 2 laps to go, less than 2 laps to go, and I decided it's time to start getting the pace up pretty good. So I hit it really hard into this, get the pace high. We're doing 24 miles an hour. So really trying to wear everybody out for whatever it's worth at the end here, into this switchback, and then I know I can hit it again around this next one to put a little more hurt in the legs. So hopefully they make some errors in handling, but really just banking on being able to get a little bit of gap before the finish. I know that if we get to the finish, I want to be the first one through that corner, so gonna have to make that move at some point and just wait them out. So do the switchback into the pit, and then they're on my wheel. So we pretty much just roll together at a good pace for the next lap, and then come in here to the final lap. decided it's a good time to take some water. Brought the bottle, so might as well drink it. And we're starting the last lap here. I'm happy with being on the front. Can keep the pace pretty standard, or attack whenever I need to. My idea here was to kind of take it slow into the more technical points and then accelerate out of them. The hard part is we haven't been going that slow into most of the technical stuff, and I don't know the pace or the handling for that. So right here, get bunched up a little bit, and I think Owen was actually like letting a little gap go to me. Hit it pretty hard out of that to see if I can put some more pace on, essentially, into the more technical part of the course, which is this fast grass turn. I'm going to take it fast and then not pedal too soon out of it. And then into the 180. I'm going to try and keep the pace pretty low and block as hard as I can into the switchblade. So really keep that pace down for myself, and then as soon as I did that, I entered the corner a little too wide, and then Owen was able to get a little bit of a gap. So I knew it's on me to make it up to that. I think that really bunched up John Paul back there, and John Paul started to let a gap go as well. So we come through into this bumpy corner, and then I know I've got to pull this gap back as soon as I can, and hope Owen doesn't have that much pace left in him. So we get to the barriers, been doing those a little fast, and was able to pull back a little bit of a gap, and eventually would get onto his wheel a little bit later in the lap. But not trying to push it too hard, just like maintain the gap on this fast section, because I haven't gotten to him, so I'm going to be fighting that wind a little more into the 180. And pretty close to back on his wheel here. So now my goal for this lap is just going to be get around him the best I can. I have spent that match on this last lap. We come to the slalom, and I have caught him, but am not able to get around him yet. So I've got to find a good point and hope he lulls just a little tiny bit, so that I can get around and be first into that last corner. So we come through this little dirt section. He takes it a little faster than me and actually opens up a gap on the exit. Really just maintained this little like dangly gap the whole time into that technical little back forth. He was taking more of a straight line over it, and then actually exited wide there with a little bit too much pace. So I had a little bit of dirt to have more traction on into the pretty technical like log hop down here. So I'm really just hoping he's going to make a mistake at some point here. He's pushing the pace, and we're deep into the race, really close to the finish. Plenty of technical turns to go. Keeping a little bit of a gap to respond to any mistakes that he's going to make, but he kept the pace on really well. So not really going to get a big opportunity to come around him. Coming through this part into the off camber, and yeah, the gap is just kind of maintaining into the last few corners. Still has a little bit of a gap, and I know I've got to get around him before that last turn up there, but he's got just enough of a gap to where I am actually able to get like a little bit of it back before the last turn, but wasn't able to get over fast enough. End up getting second place, won the regional championship because Owen here is Canadian, but it was a pretty fun race. Thanks for watching. See ya.